when you feel that mental shitty feeling come up in those moments of overwhelm, of depression or whatever, remind yourself of when you overcame something similar, and it will greatly ease that anxiety.
I guarantee you so many people our age that are older probably feel the same thing too. They don't realize what the ability they have, right? They just don't have the right mindset, right? And it's so critical because if you don't have that mindset, you're just going to be walking into a brick wall 24/7 when the door is to your left. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to episode 51 of the Conscious Cast. I'm your host, Cal, along with my other boy, Mr. Jason
Scalora.
Dun, 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 dun. So yes, guys, today, it's episode 51. We're moving on to the second half of the generation, and we got some nice interesting clips for you. So we're getting this bad boy started. We already have people trying to interrupt us, but yeah, man, started off, Jay.
All of our fans out there.
All of our fans, man. We just got like 7 fans.
For all you're like, for all those viewers that have been with us from the start, I'm like, there's 2. That's
Hey, it doesn't matter. Better than 1, right? They're still there. Hey, we're switching it up though. We're making the content more intriguing, and I think
I like it, especially because like when I started doing the solo episodes, and I started doing the questions, it just really solidified the fact that especially since it's us two all the time, when you have like a topic and then you just riff from that specific idea, exhaust that topic, and then move on to the next. It's just so much better.
It's more enjoyable to watch. Exactly.
Yes.
Do you want to give some context on the clip before?
No. All right.
Absolute dickhead, dude.
So I'm really famous on TikTok, for those of you that don't know. So this is me on TikTok.
Yes. He went to school for it.
Yeah.
Anyways, and he's teaching classes.
So I titled the clip, How to Solve Arguments in Relationships. And it's a clip of Jordan Peterson on the Jocko Willink podcast. I think it's 92, 98, something like that. Regardless, essentially this clip is just Jordan Peterson talking about how his idea of the best way to solve an argument in a relationship.
Things I recommend, and this actually works, is when you're in one of these battles and you can't bloody well get out of it, you separate, each go to your room and you sit and think, okay, that person is really wrong and I'd like to give them a good stomping. But then you think, no, I got to live with them. So that's probably not a good idea, right? Because I don't want to live with someone who's like stomped and angry about it, because they're going to take their revenge, like if they have any spirit at all. So you cannot win an argument with your wife. That's just wrong. You can't. You can make peace. You can come up with a solution. But if you win, she loses, and then she's the loser. And like, unless you want to have a loser around, that's not a very good strategy. Anyway, so you go to your room and you think, okay, fundamentally flawed as my wife is, particularly in this particular circumstance, there's probably something stupid I did in the relatively recent past that increased the probability that we're in this little hellish place. And you think, what was it? And you think, oh God, I really don't want to know. It's like, I really don't want to know this. And so you think, no, I'm going to figure out where I'm 1% at fault. She's 99% wrong, but I'm 1% at fault. So you sit there and you think, okay, what was it? Then you let your imagination sort of wander over your past stupidities, and you think, oh, there's something I did that was like kind of underhanded and devious and crooked and pathetic and weaselly, and then you go and you tell her, and she does the same thing, you know, and she's just as irritated about it as you are. And then you think, okay. And you say, look, I'm sorry about that, and I know this increased the probability that we're in this like bitchy, horrible place. She does the same thing, and then you think, oh yeah, well, we're both pathetic losers, and we can quit playing like dominance hierarchy, and then maybe you can have a conversation about how to make it.
There's a lot there.
Yeah.
Sure. What are you thinking?
I really, really like what he said there, and I think we've touched on this many times before. It comes down to really putting your ego to the side, right? Really putting down being right, right?
Yeah.
And so if your intention's to be right, no matter what, you're going to find ways and reasons and really just any type of evidence, whether it's credible or not, to be right. Because some people, whether this be in a relationship or just any type of interaction in general, especially about divisive issues that come up, and they just want to be right regardless. And it becomes super emotional, and like it just completely distorts their ability to stay rational, right?
Right.
And they're you in that type of interaction, if someone's like coming at you, but you might be like, oh, you're not being rational at all right now. And they'll be like, oh, I'm being completely rational. And then just go back to completely like cherry picking arguments. Well, this did this for me. Well, this did, you know what I mean? Like it's completely one-sided. But I think if people are really, like Jordan Peterson notes there, if people are really able to obviously take a step back when that initial emotion, that flame comes up, right? And you're just like, holy shit, dude. Like, because it's very hard to not be swayed by those emotions, right? When they first come up, and you can say shit and things that could really, really harm the person and the relationship or whatever type of interaction you're in, and it can cause detrimental stuff. So if you're both able to be conscious of like, okay, no, we're flawed human beings, we have emotions, facts, right? Let's just take a step back right now, and we'll come back to this maybe in 15 minutes, an hour, a day, like maybe not a month, but like, you know, just
enough time for the dust to settle.
Exactly. Yeah. And because you may not think it in that moment, that you need to take a step back, right?
I know. Yeah.
And it seems as though like your mindset won't change. Yeah. But if you really like it's so true. If you do take that step back and you do really reflect, give yourself some time, see areas that you made mistakes in, right? You take the emotion out of it. You really just, you observe your emotions, right? And obviously that plays an important factor, but if you really just take the emotion out of it, be very objective and come back to it, you will, at least I find in my own experience and what I've observed from others, a very much more objective and clear-minded approach.
Yeah, and people, I mean, the amount of times I've had to drill this into people's heads, the amount of times I need to drill this into people's heads, the amount of times I've needed to tell people, like, listen, I don't care what you think is right or wrong in terms of solving arguments with people. You need to wait until you both aren't feeling emotionally charged to have the conversation. I don't care what your preconceived ideas were.
Yep.
That's how it has to be done in order for you to get where you want to go. Because there's no way you're going to be able to have a rational argument with logic and take responsibility for where you fucked up.
Yeah.
If every time you have an argument, you're in this emotionally charged and super pissed off state of mind. Yeah. It's impossible, right? And this is where it comes into play of people saying, you know, I refuse to go to sleep unless the argument is solved.
Yeah.
And it's like, sorry, that just doesn't work. Yeah. I like the way of thinking of like, leave no stone left unturned. I get that and I agree, but this is a step in the process of turning the stone. Mm-hmm. Let the emotions die first. That's step one. And if that means you need to go to bed and wait till tomorrow to solve the argument and to have that conversation, then that's a step you need to take, right? Yep. If it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, a day, 2 days, 3 days, doesn't matter. You need to wait until the emotions have died down enough for you to A, take responsibility, but B, be able to have a conversation where you're not going to say anything stupid for you to solve that issue, right? Yeah. But people really need to understand that. That's how you need to view that, right? Because if you need to go to bed before you can have that conversation, then you need to go to bed before you should have that conversation, right? Because again, when that emotion is super high, you're going to say something stupid. You're going to do something stupid. Mm-hmm. You're going to say something you regret. Yep. And when you're in that state of mind, it's impossible for you to see things because that emotion fogs what the logic and the reasoning is. And it fogs you from taking responsibility.
Yeah, and it, like you said before, like going to bed or, you know, giving it time is a step in, you know, turning that rock over,
it's
right?
It's a step in the process.
Exactly. It's a step in the process. And if someone with the mindset of like, oh, I can't go to bed without this thing being solved, you're actually further digging the rock into the ground, right? And so, so
it's counterproductive.
Exactly. That's a great word. It's counterproductive. And I think when individuals are able to stay conscious of just the emotion, right? And because I think a lot of times people will be like, when they have the mindset of, oh, we need to face this now, right? We have to face our feelings, face our whatever emotion we're going through now, right? Even though they might be completely engulfed in their emotions, right? Even if they are a little bit conscious of it, they're like, no, we need to deal with this in the now, right? But if your ultimate goal is to move toward, I would question what your ultimate goal is, right? Like what would your ultimate goal be? Would it be, because it definitely could be being right for someone that is conscious of it, right, and wants to face it, But I think for someone that may not be right and they recognize that responsibility within themselves, they're really able, I don't know, it's tough. I just really question what their ultimate goal is.
Right.
No?
Well, I mean, because what it makes me think of is you either both win or you both lose. Because if you're in a relationship with somebody, you have to factor in the fact that you have to take into account that you're going to be with them tomorrow. Yeah. You're going to wake up with them for the next month, for the next year, for the next couple of years, right? You can't throw that out when it comes to arguing, because you might say you've won the argument, but like Jordan Peterson just said, if you're in that state of mind and if you win that argument, quote unquote, and then they're pissed off at you because you won, did you win? Or did you further deteriorate your relationship? Yeah. Right? You think you won. Your ego feels nice because you won that debate, quote unquote. But now you're winning with the loser. Right? Now you're not winning. Now you're living with that loser. And so if you're living with your defeated wife or you're living with your defeated husband, they're not going to do, he talks about this in the episode, they're not going to, you keep defeating them in arguments over and over again, they're not going to want to be attractive to you in any way, shape, or form. They're not going to try to be kind to you. They're not going to try to make sure that relationship goes well. Because all you want to do is defeat them, right? And so let's say you do defeat them, quote unquote. Did you win or did you lose, right? You say you won the argument. Congratulations. Now your relationship is way worse than it would have been if you had faced the problem and had you and her versus the problem versus you versus her.
Exactly, man. And so funny too, because in my own personal life, there's people that are in my life that I am not comfortable with challenging, right? Not even comfortable with having an argument, right? And it just becomes me yes-saying, right? Because I am not necessarily, I don't feel the confidence, and I kind of dumb myself down too, because I understand certain topics and situations when I'm having these conversations with people, but just how the way they speak, right? The way they communicate with me, and like the way me personally, the way I act, like I habitually act in those types of situations, I don't feel comfortable, and I don't feel they make me comfortable having those types of conversations, right? So when it's a very interesting thing, and I just thought about this a couple of days ago, and because there's people in my life that I'm not necessarily comfortable having that conversation with. And I think especially when it comes to relationships and what Jordan Peterson was talking about, and what you just said, when someone is just one person on that side is always trying to be right, and let's just say the other person is always trying to move towards a solution, right? It's just like learned helplessness, right? Like over time, they're just going to get beat the fuck down, right? And so they might just be like, they might have the ability to make a fair point, right? But it has just happened to them so many times.
Why would they try?
Why would they even try? It's just like the cat that is left indoors constantly, right? You finally open the door. They know they could easily go outside, but according to their conscious mind, they're like, I don't even feel like moving or like, going outside or whatever, so it's just like that. And it's like someone just gets beat the fuck down so much, right? And you're just constantly having one person that's always like, oh, I'm right. I'm maintaining that right position. Right. Like I'm never wrong in a relationship, right? And I think that is highly detrimental.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to you either both win or you both lose, right? Because you're not looking at the big picture. Because you think you won the argument, but did you win the argument? Because now you're in a relationship with them tomorrow and the next day. And they're pissed off at you. And now your relationship's way worse. But you won the argument. Congrats. Right? You both lost. You both lost. Because if that was the last conversation you were ever going to have with them, sure, you won. Good for you. But that's not the case.
It reminds me of like, what are you using that argument towards, right? What are you using the argument as a means to an end towards, right? So like, are you using that argument to be right? To feel that egoic superiority, right? Or are you using it towards actually figuring out what the problem is, right? And it may be tough. It may be, it is tough. It is hard, and it's by no means easy, but the more you're able to take a step back and literally take an objective approach about it, and what approach you take to whatever problem you have, that's dependent on the situation. But it really comes back down to not seeing each other on the same team, right? You're not.
That's what I was
not.
just about to say.
Exactly. You're not on separate teams, and like, I don't know, for people that are just constantly right and are constantly trying to be right, and that's all they care about, that relationship will definitely not last long, or friendship or whatever.
Because how are you supposed to navigate a relationship with somebody when it's not a relationship? It's me versus you. That's all it ever is.
Yeah.
If every time you have any conflict, it's you versus them and not both of you versus the issue at hand, no issue is ever going to be solved, because the issue relies within the fact that both of you are just against each other, right? So it's like, well, here's the problem, here's me, here's you. You're not even looking at the problem anymore.
Yeah.
You're using the problem as a means to an end, to win, to feel superior or whatever, to feel significant or whatever. But simultaneously, you're deteriorating your relationship because your ego feels like it needs to be right.
Yeah, and I have a question for you, because this is something that was like been floating in my mind recently, and it's about what I mentioned earlier. And for people that are in my spot, right? In certain, like, obviously when we're having a conversation, like, I feel completely comfortable like bringing up a challenging point or whatever. But well, let's just say I have another person in my life that is constantly, I feel like I have like a lack of confidence. I dumb myself down, right? And
so what do you mean by dumb yourself down?
So I literally consciously, when they're talking about whatever they're talking about, right? Literally, like, so objectively, I have knowledge and ability to bring up a challenging point, right? But when I'm having that conversation with them, I don't consciously think of that type of stuff. So I'm just going along with what they say and agreeing with everything they say.
Because you don't want to feel the conflict?
That, and I don't, and I think it's like subconscious, I don't want to feel the conflict, right? Because if I bring up something, I feel as though it will generate some type of emotional conflict, like you said, right? Okay. So I do want to avoid the conflict, right? And so someone in that type of situation, right, that doesn't feel, maybe be in a relationship, a friendship, or like an interaction, and maybe you don't have the answer to this because it is kind of tough, but what would you say to someone that is in that same type of spot that I'm at, right, in certain types of relationships in their life, that feels that lack of confidence, right, that feels, that wants to avoid that type of conflict and the like?
Right. So, I mean, here's the thing with that is if you're in a position where you don't want to get into conflict with somebody, and it's because, I mean, you really have to ask why, right? Because in your case, I mean, knowing you, and I'm comfortable telling you this, and you already know that this is kind of one of your flaws. Yeah. The reason why you want to avoid the conflict with people is because your ego wants to be liked by everybody. Yeah. And so the minute that you say something that contradicts what somebody else says, you risk being liked as much from that person or from other people because you're presenting your own ideas out and they contradict to whatever's the argument or debate is at hand.
And it'll potentially generate conflict.
100%. And maybe it would. It probably would, right? Especially with somebody who has a big ego themselves on the other end.
Who wants to be right.
Right?
Yep.
But if you're in that position, you got to ask yourself, how am I going to feel about myself tomorrow, thinking about the fact that I don't have enough courage to even stand up for my own beliefs, right? What is that doing to your soul? How are you going to feel about you? You know what I mean? Because the only person that's walking around with that mind 24/7 is you. And you have to live with that, right? So you have to ask yourself, is it worth being liked by people, to be the harmless puppy that just agrees with what everybody says? Is it worth it to you? That's not for me to decide. Exactly. But you have to ask yourself, is being liked by everybody worth it to you to not voice your opinions on whatever it is that's going on?
Yeah. And also, too, like, that is critical. But I also feel like you got to pick and choose your battles, because if it's over something like a sports statistic, right? Is it worth getting into that emotional conflict? But when it comes back down to like your core beliefs, right? What you feel, and I'm not saying like, let's just say you have different like religious beliefs. Okay, obviously, like, I'm talking about truly divisive issues that, are questioning you as an individual.
Right. I mean, you got to think about who it is. I think that, for me, that's the biggest thing. Yeah. Right? Because, for example, growing up, it had me and one of my friends. I could say his name. Me and my friend Matt. we're both always just butt heads because we're both so stubborn and our egos showed up in very similar ways. So it didn't matter what we were talking about. If there was any sort of disagreement, we went down rabbit hole after rabbit hole after rabbit hole, and it just got shitty every time because we just were so stubborn and stupid,
Yep.
like so emotionally immature.
Yep.
And so anytime that there was any little conflict, like a sports statistic or any sort of opinion-based thing that we disagreed on, we would take it to the extreme, right? And so when it comes to somebody like Matt, maybe it's best for me to just shut up and take the other side and just be like, yeah, whatever. It doesn't really matter. Whatever. And not engage in it. Even if I disagree, I don't even have to say, like, for your soul, it's probably best for you to be like, yeah, I don't agree, but it's not even worth having the debate about. And then even if they still be like, no, let's talk, I'll be like, no, I don't care. Sorry, it's like I'm just not doing this.
So as long as you consciously know you disagree, right? You don't necessarily externalize it.
Well, you can, but you don't have to go down. You just don't have to go down the route. If it's not worth it, it's just don't do it, right? But for somebody like, but that's with Matt, right? But with somebody like you, it could be totally different, right? Because if you and I could have a disagreement on something, even if it's a sports statistic, we can just have the conversation and it'll just be a conversation, right? And we can literally hash out every single disagreement and it's still always going to be respectful. Neither one of us are going to leave the conversation being shitty, right? There's not going to be some emotionally charged, stupid conversation or argument that arises from it, just because that's the way you and I can interact, right? So it doesn't have to turn into a battle, but just pick your battles, like with who and with who you want to have that argument / conversation / debate with, and understand where they're coming from, right? Because if they're coming from a place of ego and stubbornness,
right, probably won't be a
logical debate for very long.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So this next clip is Jordan Peterson, same podcast, same thing with Jordan Peterson. He talks about how serotonin works in lobsters, and so for the viewers, stop. Listen.
Shut up, phone.
Listen carefully, and don't just take it so objectively. Thinking about, like you just burped into your shirt.
Gotta be polite, dude.
You're like, oh. You're like, oh, excuse my moan. Don't think about this so objectively. Fuck. Don't think about this.
Use it as a metaphor of what you could relate it to.
Exactly.
In your real life.
Yes.
See the symbols and the representations of bigger.
Philosophize this how it works for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. There's a deeper meaning to it than just serotonin in lobsters.
Didn't you say you could inject lobsters with serotonin and they start to stand straighter?
Yeah, you can
Or not
basically
stand,
give them antidepressants. So, like, if a lobster gets defeated in a fight, then he's statistically more likely to lose the next fight than you would guess from a tally of his previous victories. So that's the first thing. If you lose, you increase your risk of further loss. But if you win, you increase your risk of future gains. That's a very important principle. It's a crucially important principle. It governs life. But yeah, if you take a lobster and he gets all defeated and he's off pouting and won't fight anymore because he's, having a bad day, and you inject him with serotonin, essentially give him antidepressants, it's the same thing, then he'll straighten up and he'll go out and have another scrap. It's like, and I read that, I don't know, it's probably at least 10 years ago when I was reading about, the neurophysiology of these neurochemical systems. That's why I got onto it. It was another thing that just blew me away. I thought, really, you're kidding? That circuit is that old? It's that old? That's way before there were trees, eh? Yeah. That's how long ago that is. And so hierarchy is a patriarchal construction. How about no? How about that's wrong?
What do you think?
Yeah, man, it's like a reinvigoration of someone's ability to restore confidence in themselves, right? And so I think, take the serotonin lobster example to the side for just a second, but like using that as an example, I think a lot of times, like what I was describing before, someone just becomes so beat down, right? They just get beat the fuck up, or they just lose confidence in general, right? Or in any type of activity they do. Having like a restoration or like restoring their ability and confidence in themselves to go back out there and not necessarily, because to go back out there and perform at their best ability possible, or just perform at their best ability. I think a lot of people will a lot of times not be able to do that because they lack that confidence in themselves, right? They don't necessarily believe in themselves or what they're doing or necessarily the message they're trying to send to people or just any type of activity they're pursuing in their life. And so that can lead to a lot of depression, right? That can lead to a lot of negative thoughts. That can lead to you really just being like questioning a lot about yourself, you know, and especially when you are in that ego state of mind, when you're feeling inferior, right? When you're in a, I guess you could say maybe you're interacting with others, right? And you think everyone else's life is better than yours and yours is terrible. I think just really understanding your ability and objectively seeing where you're at, regardless of necessarily where others are at, is crucial. Because if you can be like, okay, I'm a videographer, right? Maybe I'm definitely not the best, right? But I can 100% get better, right? Rather than being like, I'm a dog shit videographer. There's others that are way better than me. They make way better content than me. And then just sulking in that. Having that thing outside of your control that you can do nothing about. But there is stuff in your control that you can do stuff about. You can become a better videographer. You can do all these different types of things. And really just understanding that, right? Restoring that belief in yourself, right? Injecting yourself with serotonin, right? Which is literally just you changing the programming of your mind, changing your beliefs, right? That is that shot of serotonin that we all can do.
Yeah. I mean, because for me, immediately what I think about is the cookie jar, right? So David Goggins talks about how he has this concept that he uses for his mindset, and David Goggins is a fucking animal, can run 100-mile races on broken feet. Like, dude has done ridiculous things. He talks about the cookie jar, which is, for him, when he gets in a low spot, or like he said, like when he's on like mile 70, 80 of a 100-mile race, and his feet are broken, and he's deteriorating, like he's fucked up. And he has this thing called the cookie jar. And what he does is he has these mental cookies that he uses when he's feeling shitty. He thinks back to the times where he's had previous wins, right? You went through Navy SEAL training 3 times. You went through hell weeks like this. You grew up with your dad all fucked up. You've gone through all this. You've overcome that. You've overcome living in a super racist place. Like all these crazy things that he's overcome, and it juices him, right? And in the same sense where if a lobster loses a fight over and over again, and you inject it with serotonin, it'll go out and have another scrap, right? It'll go out and fight again because that serotonin lifts you up and gets you to keep moving forward, right? We're human beings. We're not lobsters. We can, through thought alone, create emotions within ourselves. We're the only creatures that can do that, to our knowledge. We're the only beings that can think a thought and feel a certain way. Can think a thought and inject ourselves with dopamine or serotonin, or the opposite, make ourselves feel shitty or worse, right? Or whatever, right? And so with that in mind, when you're in that spot, as corny as it sounds, try to give yourself encouragement. Use your own cookie jar. If shit's going bad, if shit's hitting the fan, if you're having reoccurring loss after loss after loss, go back and reflect on the times where you've kicked ass. Reflect on the times where you've overcome adversity. Because then in those moments, you're injecting yourself with that serotonin in a sense, right? Because then you're going to realize like, oh shit, you know what? I am kind of a fucking badass. Although this sucks right now, and you know, I fucked up here and I've made mistakes and I'm not exactly doing great right now. I've done this in the past. I've done this in the past. Go back in the cookie jar. Reflect on the times where you have done amazing things, and it will juice you forward. And like from experience, like it fucking works. Like a lot of times, like excuse me. A lot of times, like when I'm going through like a slump, or it'll be like, for example, when I got home for summer break, I literally didn't even unpack my things for a week. My room was gross. I didn't do content. I wasn't doing it. Like I just felt shitty. Like I was just in a slump for a week. And then I was like, damn, like I suck. I fell off the wagon, whatever, like defeating thoughts. And then I was like, wait a minute. Like, what about the year straight where you woke up at 4 a.m. every single morning? Like, you're a fucking animal, bro. You're different. You're built different. As egoic as that sounds, like, that shit got me back into gear. that's me injecting myself with serotonin, because I remember like, yeah, although I'm kind of doing shitty right now, you're still a fucking animal, right? This doesn't define you, right? You can be better because you've done this and this and this and this and this.
Yep.
Reach into that cookie jar, pull out the shit that that proves otherwise. And so I know I went on a big tangent there, but for me, like that's what it immediately makes me think of is you have to remember that you're a human being, and by thinking thoughts alone, you can create whatever emotion that you want to create within yourself and get yourself to do the things that you need to do.
And it's really about getting your mindset back on track, right? It's not about, because like when you reach into the cookie jar and you think about all their past experiences that show you your ability, that show you what you can do, right? As opposed to what you're feeling right now and what you think you can do, right? You're not necessarily doing it to put yourself up above others. You're really just trying to get your mindset back on track, right? And to be like, I can fucking do this, right? And regardless of what's going on around me, right? If I can just go within my own mind for a second, right? This is when you should dive into the past, when you should use your memory to your advantage, right? And just be like, I have been successful in this, and I have done this and this and this, right? And that allows you to have those beliefs, right, changed, right, and have those immediate feelings shift towards, I guess you could say, a state that will allow you to perform very well, or whatever type of activity you're diving into. And I think it's crucial, because I know even in my own experience, a lot of times, like naturally, we're human beings, and we want to strive for goals, right? We love progress, and that by a byproduct is happiness, right? And so we're always in this journey, right? We're always chasing our own tails, right? And of course, that should be diminished, and you should be aware of it. But we're like, all the time, like no matter what, like I'll achieve something, like I'll get up a video, or I'll feel really productive, right? And that gives me happiness, but it's only for such a long time that stays there. And it's almost as though when you get back on that journey to, I guess, maybe produce a video or go to the gym, hit a new PR, it's almost as though, since that past experience feels like nothing, right? And you can't necessarily tangibly feel it in this moment, it's very hard to recall in your mind, right? So it's hard for you to think of your past PRs, to think of how you've deadlifted 405 for 5, right? And now you can only do it for 3, right? And it's hard for you to really think about what you can do, because that past experience feels like nothing, right? It's like it's that moment that you feel of progression, right? In that moment, but as time goes on and it starts to decline over time, that's when I really think people like they get back into that phase of feeling less than, or feeling that lack of confidence, right? And so when they necessarily might not achieve that end or whatever they're trying to strive towards, they'll just be like, fuck, man. But but once again, if you are able to reach into the cookie jar and somehow, some way, really reinvigorate yourself with those same type of emotions through thought, right? And that you use your past credibility to really propel you in your present moment activity, right? So I've produced, like for me, example, I'm like, I look at video projects and I'm just like, wow, God, this is a big project, dude. I really just procrastinating and not really feeling like it. Right. But I've produced so many videos, like over 330 videos, like on YouTube and whatever. And I completely forget about it. It's like, I just forget about it, dude. It's like, what? It's like, I don't know, man. It's crazy. But
it is.
You really got to recall that type of stuff and let it come back down to you and trust yourself.
100%. And when it comes to the cookie jar, a lot of times, because when I try and explain this concept to people, a lot of times I think it's like, people think of it in a manner where it's like, when you reach into the cookie jar, you just think about past achievements, right? But that's not necessarily how it works. Okay. Like for me, when there were, like, for example, I've had many deaths in my family, right? And when my second grandmother passed away, it was like I was in a dark spot, right? And I just felt like shit for a long time. But I remembered, like, oh shit, like I remember the first time that this had happened. And in that moment, I felt like it was never going to change. I felt like I was always going to be in this spot. I felt like I was always going to feel terrible. But then a couple weeks went by and I was a lot better. And then a couple months went by and I was fine. Like, and the thought of it didn't have that emotional charge anymore. And I wasn't feeling so upset about it. And so that was the same thing. That was reaching into the cookie jar. That was the concept of remembering this too shall pass. Because even though in this moment I feel like shit, I've been here before. I've done something similar to this before. And I know it feels like it's going to be forever in this moment. But I remember the last time it felt like it was going to be forever in that moment. And it passed. And I went out on the other side and I was not only good, I was better than I was going into it. And so remembering that and reaching into the cookie jar and remembering that you can get through it because you've done shit before and have gotten through it and have gotten past it, it will greatly increase your ability to not only feel better in that moment, but to have the anxiety be lowered and have the depression be lowered because you know that you're going to be okay because you've done shit before. And whether you use it of like I did with a death in the family or the feeling of depression after you get out of a relationship or whatever it is, reach into the cookie jar. Remember that you've gone through these things before and you can do it. As corny as it sounds, you can do it because you have done it. Yep. But in that moment, it feels like impossible. In that moment when you feel so low, it feels like you're just going to feel like this forever. It feels like you're just going to keep listening to sad song after sad song and just going to stay crying in your pillow every single night. But eventually you get on the other side because you've done it before. But if you can reflect in those moments and remember the past times where it felt like it was going to be forever, it will help you remember that it's not going to be forever. You'll be able to get on the other side.
Yeah, and I think I mistakenly took that common interpretation of the cookie jar. But kind of like what I was saying before, it gets your mindset back on track, right, to a certain extent. But it also, like, in the achievement domain, right, it gets your mindset back on track. But when you expand it to every type of situation, right, it really, like, when you look at the cookie jar and you pull out those past experiences, right, and you're looking at it on your new iPad. It provides this like assurance, right? And this type of certainty. And not necessarily, I don't want to say like assurance and certainty that like all your problems will go away this moment, but like you said, you understand that you don't know when, you don't know necessarily how, right? You just know that it will end, right? It will come to an end at some time. And I was talking to my mom about this. It was like during COVID, she had she just had like a new job to pick up here. And she was like, Cal, this training is awful. I don't understand it at all. This is so complicated, really, really stressed out. And I totally understood where she was coming from because it's like, it was pretty much just picking up another job that like she was expected to learn in 2 days, right? In a completely another category like she was never trained for. So that's completely understandable. And I said to her, this is something that I use in my own experience. I'm like, literally what I just said. I was like, whether this be like writing a philosophy paper or, just going up against any type of hard obstacle in my life, I'm just be like, I don't know how I'm going to get there. I don't know what approach I'm going to do, but I know somehow, some way, I'm going to get this done before the deadline happens because I always do, right? And I don't know what it's going to be. I have no clue right now, but I'm going to trust the process and where I'm just going to focus what I can do right here, right now, take baby steps, and you'll start to pick up on clues. You'll start to pick up on patterns, right? And aside from focusing on the main goal of like, oh my God, I have to get this training done completely. Okay, just go into the first lesson. Yeah. Start learning. It seems stressful, right? And then you start writing a couple sentences. Maybe that sentence is dog shit, which most likely it is. Or you start to just see little things, and then over time, my mom like learned it within 2 days, right? Like she thought it was like this impossible thing, and then the impossible became possible, right? So it appears impossible in your mind, right? Yeah. But in actuality, right, you just gotta put that mental bullshit to the side, right? And not calling it bullshit, but when I say bullshit, I mean it's not
the bullshit.
It's bullshit, all right? Like I don't know what else to call it. Don't take it in a negative way, but like you just put it to the side, and then you start to really move towards that end that you really are feeling as though you'll never get.
Yeah, because in the present moment, it feels like it's going to be forever.
Yep.
Whether you feel good or bad or indifferent. When you're in that moment, whatever the moment is, it feels like you're gonna feel like that forever, whether it's a breakup or you lost somebody or whatever.
Yeah.
But if you can reflect on the times where you remember that you've gone through it and you've come out the other side better than ever, that's what's going to help you get through.
Yep, absolutely. And having that trust in yourself. And like every time, it always feels so good when you just trust yourself, right? Like and that's all it's about. Like you just like, I don't know how I'm going to get there. I know I'm going to get there, though,
Yeah.
right? You just know. You just trust yourself, right? And you will fuck up. You will make mistakes, but if you could do whatever you're doing to the best of your ability, right? And trust yourself, keep that positive mindset, right? And it's rather than just, punching a hole in the wall, right? And you'll be way better off. And I just remember, I have to say this because I remember like before I like really started the self-improvement, meditation, spirituality, I would always like write papers, and this is the exact scenario I'd be in, right? I'd be writing a paper and I would just rage, man. I'd be so fucking pissed because like I had no idea where and I would start cussing off the teacher. I'd be like, this is her fault, not taking any responsibility.
Man.
I'd be like, dude, I would be like, I would be so angry. And
Dude, I've been in the same place.
I would be shouting, right? I'm like, what the fuck? And my mom would be like, Cal, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. Even though, I completely wasn't.
That's weird. Like, I remember doing the same thing.
Dude,
Like,
oh my God.
growing up, you have like a super long assignment.
Dude, this was a couple years ago, man.
Yeah.
Like, but now it's completely different. Like, I'll get a little bit, but it's not nearly to the same extent.
Yeah, but like when you can't see the end, you don't know how the fuck you're even gonna get going on this project.
Yeah, it's so stressful.
And you just have you mentally pile on every step of the process, and you don't even know what those steps are. You're like,
yeah, exactly, dude. It's such facts, and I just I guarantee you, so many people our age and into the future, not into the future, into the future and beyond. No. So many people that are older probably feel the same thing too.
Yeah.
And they're just like they don't realize how good they could be, right? Or not good, what the ability they have, right? They just don't have the right mindset, right? And it's so critical because if you don't have that mindset, you're just going to be walking into a brick wall 24/7 when the door's to your left.
When you feel that mental shitty feeling come up in those moments of overwhelm, of depression or whatever, remind yourself of when you overcame something similar, and it will greatly ease that anxiety.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that has been episode 51 in the books.
My thumb feels like it's about to fall off.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry. I forgot about
Nature.
Dude, when we didn't damp up at the beginning, like when we dapped up like that, I was like, that felt so weird.
It's not that bad.
Blah.
Shout out to Joe Iacovelli.
Joe Iacovelli. He will be on the podcast in the next 2 to 3 months.
Handsome piece of ass.
Where can they find you, my man?
Jason Scalora. JASONSCALORA.
Yes, sir. Love yourself because I love you.
Stay handsome.
And we're clocking on people.
Peace.